We've had a request to bring one other item up in the agenda, and that is a notice of motion regarding the Brunswick Music Festival, if that's suitable to Councillor Rob Thompson. So I would like to ask that we consider notice of motion 4815 regarding the Brunswick Music Festival. Councillor Thompson, would you like to move that motion?
Yes, happy to move the motion as presented on page 256, and I'll speak to it about a second.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Yildiz is seconding the motion. Councillor Thompson.
This is a contentious one that we get each year, but one that's probably worth discussing. The Pam, who looks after our Brunswick Music Festival and Sydney Road Street Party, through quite a lot of effort and work from volunteers, through no fault of their own, often finds that we come up a little bit short with the dollars that are spent. Rather than looking for more money, what we are looking for is a waiver on council facilities for the duration of both of these events. So we're not looking for further funds, but we're looking for fully discounted occupation of both the Brunswick Town Hall for the duration of both those events. I point out that some of those financial resolution impacts are slightly different. This year's Brunswick Music Festival has actually been contracted down to only a bit over 1 week, so the actual days of occupation will be slightly less. So the actual waiver will be substantially less than the numbers that were presented there, although in saying that, that is commercial rates that we're looking at waivering. This is purely a cost of staff or facility hire that we're looking to waiver here, so I can't really represent that as a figure to council.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Would Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to it as well? Are there any other speakers for this item, for or against, or questions? No? And I'd like to acknowledge that Councillor Teddy has joined us. So I'll put that to the vote. People are happy to proceed that way. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now resume at CEO report 6/15, Christmas hours of operation. Do I have a mover for the recommendations in the report? Councillor Gillies, you would like to move the recommendation? Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lenker-Thompson? Would you like to speak
CEO
to
615?
CO 615, Christmas hours of operation? Right. Apologies if we raced a bit too fast for that.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation.
I will hear from the mover and seconder first and then consider the alternative.
Sure.
Would you like to speak to Councillor Gillies?
Yes, I would. Look, I'm fully supportive of this. I am so because this has been the practice, and the reality is that in a situation where we're in a rate cap environment and we've had to reassess how we even pay our staff in terms of the EA, the enterprise agreement that covers them, I think that any further erosion of their current conditions would probably not be appreciated, and I appreciate everything council's employees do for us because they work very hard, and you know we're always expecting more and more of them, and I think that this is perfectly fine.
Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to it as well? No. Okay. I will consider an amendment. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to?
I wanted to change the closing time on Thursday the 24th of December from 2 p.m. to 12 noon. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Sure. I'll first ask, okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. You've moved the substantive motion, so...
So
I'm just going to ask the mover and seconder if they're happy with the amendment to be incorporated as part of the substantive.
Yes.
Yes, excellent. So we will now hear further debate. If Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak?
I just had, I know that there's not a Christmas party on the afternoon of the 24th of December that this year, that in other years there has been the party in that afternoon, but the parties are taking place at other times. But it has, the offices have always closed at 12 noon, and I believe they should continue to do so.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out,
Yeah,
Councillor Kavanagh, because I thought that we were just continuing on a tradition.
So just for the sake of the minutes, the amendment is considered now part of the substantive motion, given that the mover and seconder were happy with that. Is there any further debate on this item, for or against? No? Seeing there's no further debate, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to Corporate Services DCS 8715, Assembly of Councillors record from 1st of September to 30th of September. Is there a mover of a motion? Councillor Gillies. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Gillies?
No, that's fine.
Councillor Yildiz. Any further debate on this item? Okay, being that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We move now to DCS 8815, appointment of council office holders and councillors on committees for the upcoming year, 2015 to 16. Is there a motion on the
I'm happy to
table?
move
Councillor Kavanagh.
recommendation with the attachment that we've all received. We've just received pages 1 and 2, but we had the other pages earlier. I've just put that somewhere.
Is there a
So-
seconder for the motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to it, Councillor?
I think one thing it points out is the amount of different committees, both internal and external, and community reference groups, etc., that councillors do sit on as part of their role as a councillor. And I also think it's an endorsement that some of the areas were contested and had to be discussed to see who would be doing it. I think that's a good thing because that says that councillors are engaged and want to contribute as much as they can. So I think what's come out of that is an excellent group of both councillors responsible for and councillors representing on the committee. And I wish everyone a happy 12 months in their endeavours on those.
Councillor Yildiz, would you like to say anything to this item?
No, not really. I think it's pretty
I just-
self-explanatory. We discussed this on Monday at
Yep.
the IND.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. And just to clarify for councillors, in terms of the updated list, because these have been going through some workings, the updated proposed council office holders, as opposed to the one that was circulated by email, the one we're approving tonight has recreation, leisure, facilities and major events as a shared portfolio between Councillor Yildiz and Kavanagh, and social diversity, multiculturalism and reconciliation is also a shared portfolio between myself and Councillor Yildiz. So just for the record to state, that is the updated version that we're considering with those shared portfolios.
Can I
Are
make
there-
an amendment?
Councillor Thompson, you'd like to make an amendment?
Yes.
Yes, please propose it.
Can I change the letter L to R in Urban Planning Committee?
So Councillor Rob Thompson, you're going to stand for the Urban Planning Committee.
Where are you?
No,
Rob's back.
What's wrong with how it's written?
So Councillor Rob Thompson would like to be on the Urban Planning Committee, and currently it states Councillor Lenka
right.
Thompson.
Sorry.
This is,
Please turn that the title.
Enjoyed the job.
Is it both of you or just one of you?
Councillor, can I just ask for some clarification? One second. Councillor Lenka Thompson, would you like to also be on the Urban Planning Committee?
I'm happy to remove myself for the remainder of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're replacing R Thompson with L Thompson, L Thompson with R Thompson.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay, now I've got you.
Replacing, yes, for 2 months.
You're going. So it's yes. It's an amendment. Is the amendment acceptable
Yes.
to the mover and seconder? Excellent.
Yes,
So we'll
Jermaine.
consider that as part of the substantive amendment. Is there any further debate on this item? Just before we close, I just want to say that, as you can see before you, there is a lot of work that councillors do behind the scenes and advisory committees and external committees and networks. And just want to thank all the councillors who put their names forward. And there are a number of councillors who are chairing and placing themselves on multiple committees, which is significant work. So just want to say special thanks to everyone who's put their names forward. So I will put that now to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you. We now move on to DCS 8915, Ward Meeting Protocol. Do I have a mover for this item?
May I just...
I'd like to
Yes.
seek a mover for the item.
I'd move.
Councillor Rob Thompson, is it as in the report or an amended version?
I believe I have an amended
Yes, I have an
version.
amended version.
Amended resolution that ward meeting protocol attachment 1 has been developed for the conduct of ward meetings. It outlines the role of councillors and the role of organisations in coordinating ward meetings. Ward meetings are a meeting called by a ward councillor or councillors that provide an opportunity for constituents to come and talk to their councillor or councillors about a range of ward and municipality-based issues.
I can't quite hear you. Can't,
Do apologise.
There's two further.
could you
bits.
start from the beginning? So-
Just for clarification, councillors, this came in an email at the end of the day. You will have an email with the full list of the amendments. So there is text if you would like, but I'll get Councillor Thompson to read out how.
It's written up in front of you.
Okay, so yes, the amended version is now on the screen if you want a minute to have a look at it. And Councillor Thompson, do you want to just read it out, please?
1.3, venues for both board meetings and council meetings can be booked through the executive assistant to the councillors.
And
Number 2, roles and responsibilities, managers' governance, arrange the venue to be booked, arrange the events to be scheduled in the councillors' diaries, arrange for the meetings to be advertised.
do I have a seconder for this amended motion from the report? Councillor Thompson? Thought I saw Councillor Lincoln Thompson. That's okay. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
Look, this is just purely for governance and clarity, and obviously, many of us conduct board meetings, and it'd be nice to have those in diaries and to be managed by the facilities or the offices that we have at our disposal. So it just makes life simple, easy, and understandable.
Councillor Lincoln Thompson, would you like to make a comment? No? Is there any further debate? Councillor Gillings? Yes.
My only issue is, and I didn't pick it up, so I apologise, was that at the very end of this, of page 39 on this particular agenda, when we're going through the ward meeting protocol, it says venues can be booked through the executive assistant to councillors. Any venue booked directly by councillors must be done at their own cost and will not be reimbursed. Now, this is about council venues versus private venues, which is fine, except that in extraordinary circumstances, such as, not so recently, last year, I had there was a stalker who was stalking me and had been for a few years. I was using council venues such as Scout Halls for my ward meeting, and it was a rotating cycle so that everyone in my ward could get to see me, but I had to then lock up by myself and take the key to somewhere else, and it was dark, and especially in winter it was not very good and not very safe. And now, of course, I hold them at the RSL in Glenroy because there are always people around. There are cameras, there's security, someone will walk me to the car if I need to. They actually do it for free, so I'm very, very fortunate and grateful to the Glenroy RSL for that. However, in those sort of circumstances, I think that there needs to be something that considers exceptional circumstances, because safety is actually very important, because it is an health and safety hazard for all people at night, not just that was an especial
Thank
thing.
you, Councillor Gillies. That's an important consideration. Are you proposing an amendment to
Yes.
would you be able to work up some
yes.
wording, please?
Yep.
So before we have any further debate. Would you like to make a comment? Yes, CEO.
Just through the Mayor, I think the key issue in any amendment will be to provide some guidance as to the extent of resources that Council is agreeing to grant on an ongoing basis to supporting ward meetings. So I think in wording any amendment, it would be really important to either be able to say, here's an upper limit, or here's, to provide some capacity to give us some guidance as to how much resource Council grants for this. And that will give us really clear guidance as to what to do.
I'm going to suggest that while we work up the wording for that amendment, that we move on to another item and come back so that we actually can have some wording written up. So
I move a procedural motion that we lay this item on the table.
Yes. All those in favour of laying this item on the table? All those against? I declare that carried. So we'll move on to... Sorry, Councillor Tapnos, we'll back to the debate. We'll move on to DCS 9015, the Financial Management Report for the period ending 30th of September 2015. Is there a move for this item? Councillor Robert Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Lambros Tapanos. Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to this?
Happy to present as read.
Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak to this?
No.
Okay. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to DCS 9115, the proposed lease of land at Sparta Place, Brunswick. Do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Rob Thompson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hopper. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Thompson?
I'm not quite sure, but I thought this had come before us and had been perhaps deferred, but I'm not sure.
Was deferred last
Yep.
deferred.
Look, great little part of Brunswick, have enjoyed this area. Number one, Sparta Place have some great ideas, and I'd like to see them executed, so I'm all for leasing of this.
And Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to this at all? Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We will now move on to city infrastructure, DCI 4515, street lighting upgrade in the Gemini distribution area, delegation of authority to procure services. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lincoln Thompson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hopper. Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to us?
Yeah, just quickly, it's good to see this report come to council. It's another bulk light, street light changeover, so it's changing our old street lights into more energy efficient ones, the LED. So it's a welcome addition to our municipal streetscape as a whole, and council has already successfully implemented the LED street light bulk changeover in the southern part of the municipality, so this is just moving it to the north. And as we've seen with the response and the greater light that's generated down in the Brunswick area, really does make a difference to our streetscapes and also to the bills and also our carbon emissions. So it's fully commend this report and endorse the recommendations on page 77.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, look, I'll really just emphasise what Councillor Thompson has already said, which is that the feedback that we've had from undertaking this project in the southern part of the municipality has really been overwhelmingly supportive. I did receive emails, and I'm sure other Southwood councillors are the same, from residents and from artists and from business owners who practice in Brunswick and who have had great benefit from the changeover in lighting. For those who aren't aware of it, this involves replacing the bulbs from the old yellow globes that currently exist to whiter, brighter LED globes, and it's just a win-win-win situation because it improves the crispness and the brightness of the lighting, which is better for safety outcomes, but it also improves sustainability outcomes, and it improves our bottom line from an economic perspective because we're spending less on our electricity bills. So a really great win for the South Ward, and I'm very happy that it's now progressing further north into the municipality as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Is there any further debate on this item? Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Kavanagh?
Just very briefly, I want to reiterate what Councillor Hopper said there and point out I met with Sydney Road Business Association Coordinator Claire Perry and Rohini, and they were just in raptures about the outcome down in the South Ward. So that's excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I might just add a quick note as well in terms of this project. This has been a long-term project of council where we've attempted to push the boundaries in terms of how some of the operation and ownership of this infrastructure works, and there's been officers who've been pushing the envelope for years now and making significant gains, and maybe we couldn't quite get to the end line that we wanted this time, but we have been told that there have been significant changes in practice that have resulted as a result of the advocacy of our officers. So particularly want to thank all the previous councillors and officers who've been championing this work. It's really fantastic. So if there's no further debate, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
May I
yes,
please
procedural motion?
Yes, procedural motion to lift DCS 89/15 ward meeting protocol from the table.
Excellent. Since it's a procedural motion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. So we'll now consider ward meeting protocol again, and I believe you have an amendment.
Yes. If I may just
Can't be
put
really made
this
as an
amendment to the end. It's not.
It can't be made as an amendment, but it could be, because unfortunately I thought council said.
So we've got Councillor Thompson and I believe Councillor Lincoln Thompson seconded it.
Okay, I do
believe.
apologise.
Is that correct? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lincoln Thompson,
Yeah,
did you second that?
yeah. Yep.
So Councillor Rob Thompson moved it, Councillor Lincoln Thompson seconded it. We've got an amendment from Councillor Gillies.
So the amendment would be added to venues can be booked through the executive assistant to councillors. Any private venue booked by councillors, scratch that. In exceptional circumstances, a private venue may be booked and paid for up to $150 per hire by council with the approval of the CEO and reviewed after 6 months of operation.
Great. I will ask the mover and the seconder, thank you, Councillor Gillies. That was clear. Ask the mover and the seconder if they're happy for that amendment. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it and consider it.
I'd rather it just be debated on. No,
Okay.
but yes.
It's not, so we will debate the amendment separately. So have we got a seconder to the amendment?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy.
Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to it further?
I don't think there's any need to. It really is about occupational health and safety, and I think that the council and we as ourselves have a responsibility under the Act to make sure that we're safe at all times.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to the amendment?
I'd just like to say that in addition to the sort of scenario that Councillor Gillies mentioned, there can be situations where there's no council venue available. And that happened to me when I was trying to organise a ward meeting towards the end of last year. And so I did book, because we didn't have this ward meeting protocol ironed out, I did book a private venue, a church venue, and then there were problems with being able to carry out the ward meeting. So I think I certainly support the wording, and generally I think we should be using council venues, but there could be other circumstances. In the northern part of Moreland, sometimes there's a bit of a shortage of meeting venues, so I'd like to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there further debate, Councillor Tapanos?
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Look, and I'm not sure I might be proposing a foreshadow to this, but there are cases where it is more appropriate for whatever reason to meet at a coffee shop, to meet at a private venue. I don't think that needs to be at an exceptional circumstance. So I think we need to be careful what we actually say in the policy. If we say you can only meet in a council venue, I don't support that, because I think the Pascal Vale RSL, I think that is a good example, right, of where it might be preferable to meet there. But I do draw the line at council potentially paying for that facility. So I think currently, and I've had many meetings that have occurred in coffee shops, that have occurred in other shops and so forth, in private venues. I think we need to enable that to occur in the policy. I think the issue becomes one of resources. So I think we should perhaps change the policy to say that if it's at a non-council venue, the councillor will be responsible for the booking of that venue and also the costs associated, if any. I think that might be one way to go. But to actually say that we will be enabling for the council to pay for a fee, I'm not sure if I feel comfortable with that. I don't know whether $150 per hour, it seems quite high to me. Per hire. It seems quite high to me, nonetheless. I certainly would want that money reported in councillors' expenses at the end of the year. I would want that to be open and accountable, because I do think it's something that we should be accountable for. Look, at this stage, I'm probably could be convinced either way, as long as there was that element of accountability. Would I prefer that the ability to have it in a non-council facility was there? Yes. Would I prefer that was just at the expense of the councillor? Yes. But if council wants to go the other way around, I would certainly hope that that expense was reported.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'm going to go to Councillor Kavanagh and then just clarify some things. Yes.
I actually think Councillor Gillies has made some very fair points on this. I just want one small change, and if this is acceptable, I'll be voting for it. Just if it is approved by the CEO, that the CEO emails all councillors of her decision, so that everyone's clear that that's what's happening. That's fine.
It's a move with the amendment. Happy with that change?
That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
It can be reported.
So Councillor Gillies wants to...
I think it would be recorded as expense, but I mean, that's okay. But I think if everyone's aware, the CEO thinks it's fair enough that the meeting will take place here, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to allow Councillor Gillies to make a comment.
I just want to make a very quick comment in terms of what Councillor, I've forgotten your name, sorry, Tapanos just said. Sorry about that. Where am I? Who am I? Look, very quickly.
Councillors, let's give Councillor Gillies our attention. It's got to that time of night. Councillor Gillies.
And welcome
Okay.
to the City of Moreland.
Councillor Gillies has the floor.
Very quickly, I just want to say that, look, that's okay if you're in a great financial position, but your financial position should not be dependent on whether or not you can meet with your residents. I have been, and here's another thing about me, I've been out of work for 4 months. I'm luckily now gainfully employed. But the reality is that when you are out of work and you're trying to survive on a council allowance, which isn't very much, I can tell you now, it's $350 or something a week, it is very difficult when you have to pay rent and put food on the table and pay your bills to actually then say once a month I'm going to fork out some money for a private venue. So I don't actually agree with that because you don't know everyone's circumstances around the table. Some of us work, some of us don't work, some of us work part-time, and all of us have different responsibilities. So that's why I wouldn't agree to that, although more than happy for it to be registered in your your councillor expenses. So.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. I just want to clarify one thing. We are still considering the amendment. I just want to remind everyone that on page 40 of the agenda is in the role of the organisation in the board meeting procedure, it does speak to non-council venues. It says officers will book the meeting in a suitable council-owned venue. If there are no council-owned venues, then the Director of Corporate Services can authorise the booking of a non-council-owned venue instead. The officer booking the non-council-owned venue must seek an equivalent venue at the lowest cost. Now, that provision is there, but we still have the amendment before us, but I just want to make people aware that that is also within the protocol. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Okay.
Vision doesn't really cover that exactly.
So I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? I declare that carried. So this amendment now is incorporated into the substantive proposal. Is there any further debate on the substantive proposal? Board meeting protocol? Okay, in that case, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Through the chair, I actually have to leave and I apologise.
No problem. Thank you, Gillies.
I'd just like to say now that everyone knows my life story, I'm going.
Thanks, Councillor Gillies. All right, we are now moving on to DCI 4615, Contract 358, Provision of Public Toilets. Is there a mover for this motion? DCI 4615.
Which one?
This 4615, Contract for the Provision of Public Toilets. Yes, Councillor Rob Thompson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to this item?
Look, happy to speak to it. Understand that there was some interest in it in relation to it being automatic toilets and so forth, and that some councillors have a aversion to them. This is purely a list of suppliers. By no means does it mean this is what we're doing tomorrow, so that's all it is.
Okay. Councillor Yildiz, would you like to say anything further? Is there any further debate? Would anybody like to speak for or against this item? I'd like to put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Now moving on to DCI 4815, Contract 377T, Tender for Construction of Connolly Avenue Shared Bridge, Coburg. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Lenka Thompson, seconded by Councillor Rob Thompson. Councillor Lenka Thompson, would you like to speak to this item?
No, just that I'd like to move the recommendations on page 91. That's fine.
Thank you. Councillor R. Thompson, would you like to say anything about this report? Any further comments? Yes, Councillor Kavanagh.
Just to point out that this is a tender for construction of a bridge over the Merri Creek, and further to a discussion earlier tonight.
Yes, good point.
It's we made claims that we could possibly do it. It's $845,659.54. It's a big item.
Yes.
And they are big items.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. That is an important point to make in terms of what we're doing in this space. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Now moving on to DCI 4915, Contract 390T, Provision of Waste Management Services for Waste Removal and Cartage Services and Public Space Litter Bin Works. Councillor Rob Thompson to move. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hopper. Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Hopper? Okay, so is there any debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. We now move on to social development, DSD 2915 Affordable Housing Options Paper. Is there a councillor to move the recommendations? Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Lenga-Thompson. Councillor Bolton, would you like to speak to this item?
I would like to move this report. I think if council votes for this report, I think and furthers our push for affordable housing in Moreland, I think we will make a significant leadership contribution. We won't be doing everything because, you know, in reality we need a massive investment in public housing in this state to really seriously target housing disadvantage in Victoria. But by taking this step, Moreland will play a leadership role in encouraging other councils and putting pressure on the state government to take this the issue of affordable housing seriously. And the recommendation in this report is to basically set up a land trust for an affordable housing demonstration project. And I think in terms of indicating the need for housing, I think it was last Sunday's paper or the Sunday before, there was an article about websites advertising tents for rent on balconies of high-rise buildings and tents for rent in lounge rooms of high-rise buildings. And, you know, the big fire in Docklands, I think it was, in the La Crosse building, the fire brigade's view is that fire was partly caused by overcrowding because, you know, sometimes up to 20 people in a two-bedroom unit or two-bedroom flat in those huge skyscrapers. So, you know, and I think in the streets of Melbourne this year, I think I've seen, you know, a category of people who are homeless who never would have been homeless, say, just a few years ago. So I think things are really tough at the moment. So, and I think we don't want Moreland to become just a millionaire's place to live. I think we need to preserve or try and find ways of catering for affordable housing in the municipality of Moreland. I know that people are moving progressively further north from Brunswick to Coburg to Fawkner, and people are even moving out of Fawkner because they can't afford housing. So there is a desperate shortage, and I think if we can start to get some affordable housing projects off the ground, I think that will be of great assistance. So I commend the report.
Bolton. Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, just briefly, and I concur with everything that Councillor Bolton says, and so thank her for her advocacy role in this area as well with Council. And also to congratulate the officer who put this report and options paper together, Mike Collins. It was certainly a big, arduous job from his perspective, and you can see in point 4 in the consultation of the report, just all the different people that he consulted with during putting this option paper together, and also the members of the Moreland Housing Matters Advisory Committee. There were numerous iterations, and there are a lot of cross discussions about what this option paper should look like and what was the will of the council. And I'd just like to note also that speaking of a land trust, this is something that this particular council has been advocating for or looking for more information since its inception. So it's something that we've all been a part of, and it's great to just see the progress of it. And yeah, hats off to the organisation for really pushing forward and making this a pilot project, because it's an exciting step in a new way to deliver affordable housing options. So I commend the council officers and the CEO for their vision and supporting this. And also, just look forward to the report coming back to us in June. So
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for all your work on this as well. Councillor Tapanos, do you have your hand up?
I'm going to request to split 1 and 2 from 3, so put number 3 separately. I'd like to speak in favour and echo the sentiments by fellow councillors who have spoken in regards to the land trust. I do think it is the right model, both economically and also housing agencies and so forth, and we had great concerns about their ability to potentially on-sell the land or not have the same values as council in regards to who they allocate it to based on need, not necessarily based on a percentage of their income and so forth. So I think the land trust model will enable council to have a program, keep its land and facilitate better outcomes long term, which we can effectively have a say in. So I think that's great, and I'm really pleased to see that that's come about and any legal complexities have been resolved. I do have a concern with point 3, and I might raise that now. We do have our airspace project, which I guess is looking at council-owned car parks and what's the best use for them into the future. Now, that's quite a complex project, and there's some really difficult decisions to be made. We know that the traders have contributed to car parking in the city, and we know that we're going to need to replace all the car parking that is taken away by the construction of something on those sites. We also know that there is a big need for open space in our city, and we hear every day from residents that apartments are going up and we need to create more open space, and some of these council-owned car parks are perfect locations for new parks. And I believe before we make a decision to have a pilot program to utilise one of those sites, we need to resolve some other issues. We need to resolve what are we going to use this land for? Are we going to use it for open space? Are we going to use it as car parking or replace the car parking if not? And are we going to use it for affordable housing? So we've dodged making that hard decision, and now all of a sudden a motion is before us to take a car park and use it for an affordable housing project. So what I'm saying to council is, let's work out what is the priority. Is it open space? Is it parks in our municipality? Or is it an affordable housing project? And I'm not sure we've made that decision. Subsequently, also, I do envisage that what we should be doing for affordable housing is advocating to the state government to put provisions in the Moreland planning scheme that force developers of developments of a particular size to contribute to public housing or affordable housing.
Thank you. So the proposal you're putting before us is to split up the voting on these 3 points separately, or points 1 and 2, points 3. Okay. I'm going to take a comment from the mover, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I just wanted to address one of the Councillor Tapanos mentioned that the land was going to go into the housing trust, but it's actually the airspace. So it's probably a bit confusing using council-owned land when it was the feasibility of the airspace rights over the car parks. That's actually going to be used in the pilot demonstration project, not the actual land itself. So the car parks will still be there. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that particular point.
Conflict with open space, though.
So there is Councillor Thompson. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes. Look, I concur with Councillor Tapanos's concerns. However, I don't believe that receiving a report will hamper that. Yep. I do understand where he's coming from. When we did discuss airspace, we looked at both car parking, the possibility of affordable housing. We also looked at open space for all of those locations. This report, if anything, is only going to bring that information forward to us and gives us the opportunity. If the recommendation is that all of our car parks are turned into to affordable housing, I would like to see how that would be done. I can't see it working, but I would expect that report would potentially come and have a smattering of alternatives for us. So I don't think that we're locking ourselves in with anything here. If anything, this is just asking for the report that we require to get that moving.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Thompson. What I'm going to do is, given that it seems to be point 3, that's a matter of conjecture and there's been a request to separate it, I'm happy to do that for the sake of clarity. So we might consider points 1 and 2 together. Is there any further debate on points 1 and 2? Councillor Kavanagh?
Actually, on the whole thing, if that's right.
On
the whole thing.
On the whole thing, sure. You can speak to the whole thing.
First of all, I just want to congratulate the officers on their work, and I congratulate the councillors who have been advocating and working towards it. In one sense, I'm disappointed that we have to have a report such as this, because in my view this is another example of state government reneging on their responsibilities. It continues to happen. I'm a grandson of a former housing minister in the late 40s and early 1950s, when thousands upon thousands of homes were built for returned servicemen and women, etc., and to see the lack of investment by our state government in such an important part of their responsibilities is entirely negligent in my view. They seem to find money for AFL football clubs, for Tennis Australia and for a whole range of things instead of what their core businesses should be, and one of those is social housing. So in one sense, I really don't believe, I'll be supporting the motion and I'll be supporting everything to do with affordable housing, but I really do feel that the main group that are responsible for it are reneging on their responsibilities.
Yeah. Is there any other debate or comment on one or all of those parts? I will put them separately. So I'm going to then put points 1 and 2 to the vote first. So all those in favour of points 1 and 2? All those against? Declare that carried. Now we're going to put
Those be recorded as unanimous?
Yes, carried unanimously. And we're going to consider point 3 now. Are there any amendments to point 3? Or we're just going to put this to vote?
Look, I haven't typed up, but if a report was to come back that would consider a affordable housing project and or open space, that would be acceptable. I just think that the open space needs to be considered in that broader.
Councillor Tapnos, do you want some time to write up an amendment?
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
can put that one because I think that's got support of the council. I do.
Councillor Tapnos, do you want to write up that amendment?
It's fine.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to debate on point 3. Yes,
Yeah,
a
on
comment?
the amendment.
So there's no, the amendment has been withdrawn. There's no amendment before us. So we're just considering point 3 on the screen. No other further comments? I'm going to put point 3 to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. That deserves to be clapped for sure. Thanks everyone. We're now moving on to DSD 3015, Employment Pathways for Young Asylum Seekers project. Councillor Hopper is moving it, and I'm happy to second that if that was okay. Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. So this is a continuation of a successful program that began in the last financial year relating to a partnership with the Brotherhood of St Lawrence to organise employment outcomes and partnerships with them for asylum seekers, and in particular young asylum seekers. This is a really difficult area for young asylum seekers. It's so difficult to transition into the workplace in Australia once they arrive here, and it's something that the federal government in particular puts more and more obstacles up for every day. What it leads to is social isolation. It leads to not having much to do with your time. It leads to barriers to being part of Australia, and so many asylum seekers who arrive in Australia really do want to give it a go and want to be a part of Australian life and want to contribute to their new home country, and this is an opportunity to help them do just that. Some of the great outcomes that we saw in the partnership program over the last year include that 27 of the participants were referred into training pathways, 10 of the participants secured work or work experience, which I think is just a really wonderful outcome. 7 participants were supported into volunteering roles, which again helps to build the CV, helps to build experience so that they can go on to find paid roles. Work opportunities were placed in the following occupations: drivers, factory hands, packers, builders, labourers and electricians assistants. 2 participants were supported to have their overseas qualifications recognised. And again, you know, having worked previously in international student recruitment, I know how difficult it is for people who are coming from overseas for the first time, looking into going into the workforce, to have their overseas qualifications recognised by Australia. So that's a really great outcome for those 2 participants. And a range of other outcomes were achieved by participants depending on their skills, interests, visa status and work rights. In the last budget, Councillor Ratner moved an amendment which included funding for this program to continue into the coming financial year, and I understand that as a council we will be receiving feedback as to who will be offering that program, but I just think that the Brotherhood of St Lawrence have done a fantastic job in offering it over the past year, so congratulations to them.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Yes, and I just echo Councillor Hopper's comments. This has been a really interesting pilot project. There's a lot of research and knowledge to be developed in terms of what are the best approaches in terms of this very tricky area of employment support, and particularly want to thank all the officers who've done a lot of consultation work and to understand how local government can play a role in this space. Are there any further speakers to this item? Councillor Bolton?
I'd just like to make a couple of brief comments. I'm really happy to see this report because when I moved a motion in support of refugees and asylum seekers in 2013, I was very keen that there be some practical assistance offered in addition to opposing the anti-refugee policies of the federal government. And it looks as if this has been really a real success, and in particular, it involved not only refugees who had work rights, but also asylum seekers who'd been denied the right to work by the federal government. I certainly concur with the other comments that have been made. I mean, stripping people of their rights to work and to engage in training, it just bores people senseless and really demoralises people. So I think this looks from the report as if it has been a really successful program. So hopefully this will continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further comment or debate on this item? I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I take that as a favour. That was in favour. Anyway, I carried this. I declare that carried. We're now moving to DSD 3115, Community Grants 2014-15 Project Status Updates. Do I have a move for this item? Councillor Kavanagh, is there a seconder? Yes, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to the item?
I'll withdraw my right until withhold if
Okay, no problem. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak? Are there any other further speakers to this item? Councillor Kavanagh.
Okay. I think, first of all, this is an outstanding report, and once again, it shows how well $430,000 has been spent. When you look through all the projects, their whole range, the depth of them, and the improvements that they make to Moreland. I will make one point. At the time of the endorsement of these projects, councillors supported one project from a councillor motion to, and that's one of the very few projects that is now remains incomplete. Right? Now, I'm not saying we should never go against the officer recommendations, but I think the officer recommendation is a really important thing. I think it says this organisation is ready to complete this project. This organisation has already, if you like, passed the first few hurdles along the way. And so when councillors then put up an organisation that hasn't been recommended, time and time again, we find that they're not ready to do it. And so I just caution councillors in the future. I know in February 2016, the next round open, probably they'll come to council in April or May, that we should almost invariably support the council officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I'm going to put that now to the vote because the debate has been concluded by the mover. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We now move on to Economic Development, DD 9115, McBride Street Faulkner Task Force. Do I have a mover for the recommendations in the report?
I'll move the officer
Councillor
recommendation.
Kavanagh. Is there a seconder?
I've got an amendment.
Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Tapanos is seconding it. Councillor Kavanagh, would you like to speak to this item?
Not at this point.
Okay, not at this point. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak to it? Are there any speakers for or against this amendment? Councillor Bolton, what's your amendment?
My amendment is to replace points 2 and 3 with a new point 2 to read, to note that since the establishment of the McBride Street Faulkner Task Force, the planning, compliance and other issues that have impacted on residents have diminished. However, most of the issues haven't been finally resolved. On this basis, Council resolves to extend the operation of the McBride Street Faulkner Task Force for a further 6 months until June 2016, and then point 4 to be renamed as point 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there a seconder to the amendment? I'm sorry, sir, we can't take any further debate at this point. It's just between the councillors, I'm sorry. Is there a seconder to the amendment? For want of a seconder, I declare that motion has lapsed. So we'll now move to the substantive item. Is there any debate around the substantive item? Councillor Bolton?
As the amendment has lapsed, I'd like to argue against the disbanding of the McBride Street Faulkner Task Force. As I mentioned in my amendment, the task force has meant that there has been a diminishing of the problems in McBride Street, but they're not by any means resolved. And after getting feedback, including quite detailed feedback from some of the residents, an extension of 6 months would probably help to resolve some of those outstanding issues. What the early disbanding of this task force means before the job's finalised means that council officers will probably most likely get bombarded with emails and phone calls when the idea of this task force was to try and deal with the complaints in a more organised and orderly way so that they could get resolved. And I think council officers have been doing a good job at trying to working across the different council departments trying to address those issues, but a lot of the issues are quite thorny and difficult to deal with and take some time to resolve. So I'm certainly disappointed that councillors didn't support my amendment to extend the task force by 6 months. I think what it will do is it will probably result in more work rather than less work for council officers. So I'm disappointed in that decision.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this report because I can understand where Councillor Bolton's coming from in that not all of the issues had been resolved, but there is such a big piece of work that has been done over since June from the council officers, and I believe that they have made some great inroads and they have come to some resolutions about the issues that were coming to council and that are issues to the residents. And I don't think it's just in the 6 months I wasn't sure what that would bring because there has been so much invested in this particular area, and I just note that the council officers, and since the task force from June, have looked at the compliance of the permits and also look at the validity of those permits, and they have come up with some breaches of their permits and which have been rectified by the property owners in the industrial precinct. So I think there is movement, and the fact that they've spent so much time and it has been such an implication on the other workload of the officers, I believe that it won't, I think they've done what a task force has set out to do, and if there are other identified non-compliances or issues that the residents have, then they still have that option of coming to council. It's not as if the task force is going to completely, or it's not as if the officers are going to completely ignore any further issues that come from the residents. So from that stance, I wasn't supportive of the furthest.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there any further comment or debate? Yes, no other further comment. Councillor Kavanagh, you can close the debate.
Just to say that I attended the IND that the Group Manager of City Development went through everything in detail as to what had happened, what had been taking place. I'm extremely confident that the officers have done an absolutely sterling job in the previous number of months. And as you can see from the resources, 89 hours of resources have been spent. And in fact, I thought that was an outstanding presentation that we received that night. So I'm confident that the officers have done the right thing here, and I'm satisfied with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? All those against?
Could my vote be recorded, thanks?
I declare that carried. I'm sorry, so we can't enter debate at this time.
It's not a debate, I just want to ask a question.
I'm sorry, so question time is for that purpose, but perhaps after the meeting you're welcome to get in touch with me or the other councillors, but I'm sorry about that just in terms of the procedure. We're now moving on to DD 9215, Draft Moreland Neighbourhood Centres Strategy and Amendment C159. Do I have a mover for the motion? Move the report.
I'd like to move an alternative.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Councillor Hopper with an
Sorry, I
alternative
said that somebody was
recommendation.
moving it. So the alternative recommendation is as stated in the report, but with a change to section 2.A, I believe it is. Just give me 2 seconds. Yes, it is. I just, rather than read the entire thing out, I just wanted to make sure that I had the right, saying the section that is changed. Section 2.A should read instead, introducing a new design and development overlay, DDO 24, to the focus areas for change in each centre to apply the built form requirements of the NCS, including establishing mandatory height controls of 4 storeys, with the exception of 5 key redevelopment sites. Introducing a new design and development overlay, DDO 24, to the focus areas for change in each centre to apply the built form requirements of the NCS, including establishing mandatory height controls of 4 storeys, full stop. Point B, replacing the Schedule 1 of the residential growth zone, RGZ1, where it applies in the neighbourhood centres, with a new Schedule 2, RGZ2, to change the existing discretionary 4-storey height control to a mandatory control and to include relevant design requirements of the NCS at attachment 5. And the remainder is the same as how it appears in the report.
The point 6, I believe, has changed as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
To provide the Director of Planning and Economic Development delegated authority to make changes to Amendment C159 based on any conditions imposed in the authorisation granted by the Minister for Planning, and to make changes to the relevant documents to correct errors, grammatical changes and any consequential changes to the amendment package and supporting documents prior to exhibition that may be required to reflect the application of mandatory controls across 11 neighbourhood centres.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Tapanos?
I'd like to have a chance to read it because
Certainly.
no one's sent it around.
Councillor Bolton, this was circulated this afternoon. Was circulated this afternoon,
But it didn't come on my email.
Hold on, everyone, just 1 second. I'll just clarify this. It was an email sent by me with some of the report amendments. The latest version went out around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, so it's an email from me, but I'll give everyone a chance to have a read of the amendment.
You want something sent out so late.
So essentially the amendment seeks to ask for 4-storey mandatory heights on all the neighbourhood centres, as opposed to the recommendation in the officer's report that asked for discretionary heights in 5 of those neighbourhood centres. So that's the key change, and the wording has been changed to reflect the amendments that would need to happen to reflect that mandatory height control. So that's the change that has been made.
Okay, I agree with that.
Yes.
And I've got an amendment.
Okay.
Just
I haven't had a seconder yet.
So could I ask, no, Councillor Tapanos has seconded the motion, so I'm first going to ask for the mover and seconder to speak to it before I consider amendment. So Councillor Hopper, would you like to speak to the amended version?
Yes, certainly. So this is a report dealing with activity centres throughout the city of Moreland. In making the changes that have been proposed as amendments this evening, those are purely seeking to reinforce and reinstate our commitment to mandatory height controls throughout Moreland and 4 storeys as a maximum in these activity centres, in those key sort of really central ones. We're talking about areas such as Grantham and Union Streets in the West Brunswick Neighbourhood Centre, Bell Street and Melville Road in the Pascoe Vale South Neighbourhood Centre, West Street Hadfield, Gaffney Street Pascoe Vale Station Neighbourhood Centre, and Nicholson Street Home Street Moreland Road in the Coburg Neighbourhood Centre. Now, I think that anybody who lives in those precincts, and especially, looking at Pascoe Vale, Hadfield, the northern parts of our municipality, would agree that 4 storeys is the absolute maximum that you would want to be seeking in any of those areas. 6 storeys is far too high to consider in an area like that. We do need to preserve and maintain the character of our neighbourhoods, and that does include the activity centres. Otherwise, I think that this is a strong report that seeks to activate those centres and to improve them moving forward into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak to the motion?
Briefly, I echo those sentiments. I do want to congratulate the officers for actually bringing this to council at that level. I think we've done a significant amount of planning policy work over the last couple of years, but one of the things that has always been missing, I think, in my view, is defining through a design development overlay, the DDO, exactly what we want to see in these activity centres. So we've done the work in our major activity centres in Coburg and Sydney Road, Brunswick and Glenroy. And all of a sudden applications emerge on Melville Road or on Bell Street. and there is absolutely no guiding principles to how we're going to develop this site, what is acceptable, what height limits, what setbacks. So I think this work is timely, and I'm really pleased to see it occur. I guess the big issue is, once more, this debate about mandatory or discretionary. Clearly, this council has indicated a strong preference for mandatory, and if we're able to preserve these areas at 4 stories, I think that would be a good result for the community and a good result for the applicant. Not discounting that 4 stories is still a significant development, so we need to remember that. So I commend this to the councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton, you had an amendment?
Yes, it's simply to, in that final point,
Point 5.
about the consultation.
Yep. Amend point 5.
If I'm looking at the wrong point, point 5. Okay, the first part of it is the same, with the addition of extra locally based information sessions for residents living near, for extra locally based information sessions, full stop. That last bit of the amendment isn't required as a result of the alternative resolution Councillor Hopper's brought forward. And in addition, that a wider range of residents be notified beyond adjoining properties.
Okay. We'll just give the minute technicians to write that up so we have the words on the screen. Beyond the adjoining properties. Maybe the word only afterwards. Beyond the adjoining properties only. Okay, so we've got this amendment before us. Do we have a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Hepner, is this amenable to the mover and seconder?
My only concern is that it's not clear enough around what a wider number of residents entails.
Yes or no?
Could I offer a suggestion, Councillor Hopper, that we could strengthen it by saying that it would come to consultation with councillors, so that officers maybe make some recommendations to us about what that boundary will be.
Yes.
So,
because I think otherwise we'd need to list, a number of streets or a number of blocks.
So we're changing the words to that a wider number of residents be notified beyond the adjoining properties only in consultation with councillors.
Yeah, to be determined in consultation with councillors.
To be determined in consultation with councillors. Councillor Bolton, are you happy with those additional words?
With those words.
So is that
in
happy
that case,
to the
then
mover?
that's acceptable. Yeah.
Seconder? Yes.
I
Happy
also
with
like
that.
to pick the catering we have. No.
Okay. Yes.
Bring your place.
Okay. So we've got the amendment now forms part of the substantive motion because it has been accepted by the mover and the seconder. So we go back to the substantive motion. Is there any further debate on the substantive motion? Councillor Bolton.
I definitely want to support the alternative resolution. I congratulate Councillor Hopper for bringing that forward, and especially because the outcome of the residential zones, I think residents would have assumed that meant a height limit of 4 stories. They wouldn't have expected something else in those neighbourhood activity centres. So, and that part of the reason I moved my amendment is because I was really concerned about residents not realising such a major change was being proposed. So I certainly agree with the alternative resolution. However, I would still, I did continue with my amendment because what we found during the public consultation around the residential zones was that people needed those very locally based consultation meetings. It brought people from those particular areas to those meetings, and I think that sort of needed, again, maybe not as large scale as the original one, but I think we certainly do need some extra ones, like particularly, say, for example's sake, the Bell Melville Neighbourhood Activity Centre and the Gaffney Sussex Street Neighbourhood Activity Centre. Those are 2 that could probably go together, but rather than being welded in with another consultation or information sessions about 2 other neighbourhood activity centres at the same time, I think it just needs to be broadened out a little bit. But other than that, I'm certainly happy with, particularly happy with the alternative resolution for mandatory heights at 4 stories.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there
Just one question. I've got a question for
Sure.
the director.
Yes,
Because
please
I
ask a
couldn't
question.
find any reference to it in the document. A third-party review rights included.
Appeal. Yes, pardon me. Through the Mayor. There's no changes to anything that's not a standard provision. So, yeah.
Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Could I please have a motion to extend the meeting time by half an hour because we've just gone over 10 o'clock? Councillor Kavanagh, is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson, all those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We will try and move through the rest of the business as quickly as possible. And if I could please ask that councillors, if you don't have to use your full 3 minutes, please try not to use it so that we can get through a substantive number of items that we've got to go forward. We'll now move to DED 9315, Shopping Strip Renewal Policy and Programme. Is there a motion? Councillor Yildiz, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Yildiz? Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to it? No. Expeditious. Is there any debate on this item?
No.
Councillor Kavanagh.
This is an important
Yes,
It is, it's very important.
Councillor John Tapanos.
Councillors, we just have gone over 10 o'clock, which does tip us over into silly season, but we'll hold it together for the rest of the meeting.
I can
Councillor
understand
Kavanagh.
the residents to want to debate it after 10 o'clock, but this is a very important item.
Absolutely.
Like, first of all, it itemises all the good work we've done over the last few years and then sets out the future. And can I say, like 6 years ago, we used to put 60,000 a year into shopping strip renewal. That's all. 60,000 a year. Nothing. Basically nothing. And I remember at the time there were a whole lot of businesses really disenfranchised with council and council's effort. And I know this is a long process and there's, I think, 48 different centres that have to go through. But I'm telling you, you look around Moreland and you can see the results of this. Whether it be in Snell Road, whether in Oak Park, whether it be in Anderson Road in North Faulkner, whether it be in Major Road in Faulkner, or Tyson Street, or a whole range of other areas that just, you can see it. So it is a great project.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And I concur that we should speak to items of this of nature. And just to add, this is the type of work we've considered a number of very significant things before us, which is the core work of council. And in terms of our economic development, this is so key to helping our community transform into the future when it is difficult to survive for example, in the retail market. So things that we can do in partnership with our business community, for example, are really, really critical. So I really commend this report and thank all the officers for all their work day in, day out to get programs like this energised. Is there any further debate, Councillor Tapanos?
Yes. Well, and John might not be happy with me here, but I also like to commend the council. And I do remember when this policy was first developed, and it took us some time to work out the criteria and what will be done and so forth. I am glad to see that so many good projects are being done, including some that did have to be prioritised. Things like Justin Avenue in Glenroy, which just had a huge safety issue, and I know that a lot of people, including Victoria Police, were very keen that we invest in that area, and we did. And I know John's been very influential because all of the ones that have been done have been in John's ward or in John's place of work, which is in Faulkner, and there's been nothing south of Bow Street. But I do hope that all the other councillors would equally take an interest in this work and lobby hard for some of the bigger ones and more challenging ones south of Bow Street as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further debate? Councillor Kavanagh, yes. Councillor Kavanagh, you have the floor and we will move on to the vote afterwards.
After $500,000 in Anderson Road, North Faulkner, well received by everyone, there's a little parishioner at St Matthew's called Con. He comes up to me and he says, I hear you had a good job doing that up there. I said, yeah, I'm very pleased with it. You're stuffed up. That's what he said to me. You're stuffed up. So you can please some of the people some of the time, but you cannot please all of the people all the time.
On that note, acknowledging the complexity of the work that we have before us, I'd like to put that item to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We now have gone through our councillor reports. I would like to go back to the minutes that we didn't determine at the start of the meeting. So I'd like to propose that we've sought clarification about the item that we were talking about previously. So I'd just like to offer some alternative wording for the minutes. That we're moving the minutes of the 7th of October and 26th of October, subject to the minutes of the 7th of October being adopted after a review of the video footage of subject to a review of the video footage and delegating to the CEO the capacity to amend the minutes to reflect what occurred in the video if it is clear. So this just goes to needing to clarify a record of the vote on one of the items in the meeting of the 7th of October. Does anyone want to read out those words again? No? Is there a seconder? Pardon? Yes, about the abstention, that's right. Is there a seconder to the amended wording around the minutes?
Yeah.
Yep, Councillor Hopper. Are there any questions or debate around that? Excellent. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move to notices of motion. Before proceeding, I'd just like to ask Councillor Bolton regarding her notice of motion, because we've dealt with the other one. There was a suggestion of taking this with another item that we're talking about in confidential business. Would you like to proceed with considering that now, or would you like to consider this motion along with considering the other motion in confidential business?
I'm happy to be guided by other councillors. I can certainly see the value in discussing my notice of motion about ballot group site in the confidential section, because there's another motion and saves us doubling up on discussion, as long as the outcome of this notice of motion is made available to the public.
So we can amend that. So I'm going to propose that we move this item to the confidential business. Do we need a procedural motion for that? No?
No.
Okay, so we're just moving this item to be considered in the confidential section of the
It might be
meeting.
appropriate for me to move that we consider this in the agenda too.
The urgent item of business?
Yeah, the urgent
yes.
item of business,
Councillor Kavanagh?
DCS 9315, proposed sale of land Hadfield, and that could be considered in confidential business as well.
Do I need a seconder for the inclusion in the agenda? Could I have a seconder? Councillor Bolton, I think, went first. All those in favour of considering this item? All those against? Declare that carried. So that will be considered in confidential business as an additional urgent business item. So we've dealt with notice of motion. We now move to general business items. So we've received a number of general business items. I'm going to go with the ones that we have received. So we'll go to Councillor Hopper first.
Okay, sorry, we normally go different system. Just bringing it up. Apologies.
Do you want to make it here?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I move that Council congratulates and thanks the Honourable Kelvin Thompson, MP, for his combined 35 years of local service to the people of Moreland, including terms representing this area at every level of government. Do I have a second?
Yes, Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Tapanos wanted to second that. I'm not sure whether...
I'll let the next member second it.
Okay, Councillor Tapanos has seconded that. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Hopper?
Thank you.
The three of us could second it.
Thank you very much. Well, look, as members of the gallery will be aware, yesterday Kelvin Thompson MP announced his retirement from his role as the Federal Labor Member of Wells. His retirement, which becomes effective at the 2016 federal election, draws to a close a 35-year career representing the people of this city. 20 years as our federal MP, 8 years as the member for Pascoe Vale, and 7 years as a councillor in the then city of Coburg, including 2 terms as Deputy Mayor. Indeed, there are some of us in this chamber who can say that Kelvin Thompson has been representing the people in this city longer than we have been alive. Throughout his career in federal parliament, Kelvin served in a number of roles, including but not limited to Shadow Minister for the Environment and Heritage, Shadow Minister for Regional Development and Roads, Housing and Urban Development, Shadow Minister for Public Accountability and Shadow Minister for Human Services, Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Shadow Attorney General, and while Labor was in government, Parliamentary Secretary for Trade and Parliamentary Secretary for Schools. He has been a particularly strong advocate of policy interests that relate to population, climate change and the environment, live animal exports and employment as the North shifts away from its traditional industrial roots. But what most members of this community will remember Kelvin for, and his contribution to public life for, is his truly local connectedness to the communities of Brunswick, Coburg, Hadfield, Fawkner, Glenroy, Oak Park, Strathmore and Pascoe Vale. During my term as Mayor, just as an example, there were frequently days where Kelvin and I would see each other for the 3rd time that day at a community function for the 8th or 10th time that week. Every citizenship ceremony, every multicultural dinner, every community festival, every creek cleanup. And that's when he wasn't fighting for us in Canberra. He also wrote a prolific number of letters to council to advocate on behalf of his constituents, whether it be on large matters like the East-West Link or urban planning, or more local matters like public trees and the quality of our sporting clubs and open spaces. To some, that might sound small. People aren't remembered in the history books for writing letters or attending community dinners, but to residents, it makes all the difference. It was clear to all of us that Kelvin knew the area that we lived in, cared about it, and was working hard to make it better every day. Kelvin sets a truly high bar for whomever is to follow him. He said yesterday that he hoped the next Labor candidate would be somebody who demonstrated local credibility. Indeed, his legacy demands this. Congratulations, Kelvin, on your extraordinary public service. Thank you for all the work that you have done for our community, for Australia and for the Labor movement, and all the very best for wherever life takes you and Kerry next.
Thank
Well
you,
said.
Councillor Hopper. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to say
Okay,
something?
I haven't prepared something, but I did want to share some of my reflections and pay tribute to our local member, Kelvin Thompson. It sure is the case, as Megan pointed out, that Kelvin, at least for many of us, has been the only federal member we remember, and I remember when I was a young kid and getting involved in politics for the first time, and it was Kelvin's first election, and working very closely with him in that election campaign, well, as much as I could, as far as letterboxing and door knocking, and having the honour and privilege, I guess, for to work for Kelvin at an early age as well. I learned so much from him, and he certainly instilled in me a legacy of community service, hard work and representation. And it's, I guess, those values that inspired me to seek more work as a community representative and even run for council. So he has been a role model, and I think that there are many people at Moreland City Council and even past councillors and mayors who would say the same thing. So I reflect back on the opportunities that he gave me in his office, the opportunities to learn from him, and I greatly thank him for it. And I guess on behalf of the community in the city, I know how much they value his work and dedication and effort. And I have similar stories to Councillor Hopper when I was mayor, bumping into Kelvin and saying to him, "Hi, Kelvin, this is the third function tonight." And he would say, "It's actually the fifth for me. Where have you been at the other two?" So I think that shows his dedication and his effort. And there was never a case where an invitation went unanswered by Kelvin Thompson, and that's certainly the experience by Moreland City Council as well. He's engaged council, he's worked cooperatively, and has been a strong advocate in Canberra for our local area. And there are many projects that Moreland has done over the years that probably would not have happened had it not been for the advocacy and support of Kelvin Thompson. So in concluding, I also wanted to also mention that Kelvin has contributed greatly on the national policy level as well. So it's not just his views on population, which have been well expressed by the media, but all the hard work he's done on various committees, particularly the Treaty Committee, which he sat on and chaired quite recently, and a whole range of work which doesn't make the media. It's always the leader, the ministers who get on the news, but it is the hard-working members at the backbench like Kelvin Thompson who really develop and contribute to policy formation. So I'm sure his colleagues in the Parliament are going to make that recognition upon his retirement, but I think it's important for us to recognise it as well. So I think Kelvin will probably go down as a great councillor. I know he has a park in Moreland named after him, which is interesting, but that shows his dedication to his local council and how much his colleagues valued him. And I guess that is the same for his state parliamentarians and also his national colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thanks. Firstly, can I give you the good news? He didn't die yesterday. It sounds like he did, but he's still alive, so that's terrific. So that's wonderful. Actually, I probably come from a slightly different point of view. Firstly, I'm not a member of the Labor Party, and secondly, I do remember actually many members of Wills before Calvin. First memory was Gordon Bryant when I used to walk down Sydney Road, etc., and then of course Bill Cleary, and of course Bob Hawke, and of course Calvin. So I've known 4 members of Wills and probably know 5 in the coming a year or so. But one thing I want to say, the first time I met Calvin, I was about 12 or 13. This was long before he entered politics. He and his brother Lex, they were about 18 or 19. And Lex and Calvin, and very shortly after my brother Paul, but Calvin and Lex were the founders, founded the Pascoe Vale Naturalist Club, the first naturalist club in the northern suburbs. And he did that when he was still at school. He was at Essendon Grammar at the time, and I can quite remember him doing it. He was a camp, and that's why I think he has the park named after him, even though we normally only do that for people who are deceased. But he certainly was involved in that right from when he was at school, and his brother Lex and his father Alan as well. They've been absolutely magnificent people. And I'm probably one of many people that would not normally vote for the Australian Labor Party, but I always vote for Calvin. Okay, so because I just think he's such a magnificent representative, and I don't think it could get any better. And I rang his office yesterday, and I just left a message to let him know how much I appreciate it. And I'll say one other thing, because I mean a lot's been covered, and they're exactly right. He's at every function you could ever imagine. But one thing he did for me in my time as mayor was during the march down at Jill at the march. I was struggling a bit, and he came up to me and. He just put an arm on my shoulder and was very, very kind to me away from the cameras, and I deeply appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Yildiz.
I won't take the 3 minutes, but just very quickly, as Councillor Tapnos was saying, Kelvin's a bit of a everywhere man. He's absolutely at the age of 60. Had his birthday a month ago or so, after suffering a pretty bad heart attack. He's a man who's, many of you may not know, Port Fairy man. He's also, these are just things I've written off the top of my head. He's an avid bird watcher, so I wish him more time now to do a lot of that. Loves reading, loves travelling. I've got a fairly good relationship with him, and I was pretty shocked, to be honest, that he was going to declare it so soon. But I did know that he was sort of getting to the end of his career. He's someone who's been extremely, I don't think he's watching because he's probably in bed, but he's someone who's extremely proactive, but also very, very committed to his role. And I think he's been one of our best federal members here, having, many of you may not know, but he started off here as a councillor, then went to state politics, and I think there's a fair few people here that are probably trying to emulate him, but I think we're about 30 years a bit too old than when he started Lambros. But anyway, he's a gentleman who's got he's got a lot of passion for the city of Moreland. I know his brother, and just only 2 weeks ago, his son Ben threw me into an Airbus 320 and took me to Sydney and back within about 5 minutes, which was fantastic. I don't know how they all did that, but he's a pilot. A lot of you may not know, but Kelvin, I'm sure, will now get back into the plane, and he's got his pilot licence. So there's a lot you may not know about him, but I wish him good luck. And I'm not sure who the candidate. I sort of do know who the candidates are, but none of us here are Peter. So there you go.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Is there any further comment? And I can say with full confidence that we, as you've heard tonight, are very thankful for Kelvin Thompson's community service. It's not an easy job always, and it's even harder to do it really well. And I think Kelvin Thompson has been an exemplary example of a good local member. So I'd like to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. No further general business items. Dealt with that. We'll move to Councillor Bolton's items.
Yes, so my first item is that Council receive a report by the February Council meeting on the likely impact of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement on Moreland Council operations.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Lincoln Thompson, would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I would like to speak to it. I noticed that the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement have been released, but the chapters that it's based on haven't been released. So it's the bulk of this agreement is still secret in nature, even though corporations have been part of the negotiating of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Ordinary people like us and even ordinary parliamentarians haven't had the substance of the agreement revealed. I believe the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is likely to have a big impact on Moreland Council and other local councils. And when the Korea Free Trade Agreement, I know it's a different document, was signed, the various state governments, including the Tasmanian government, had to revise their local procurement laws to make an exception for Korean firms. These were laws about, purchasing local contracts with local suppliers, etc. There could be all sorts of consequences for, banning of issuing contracts to companies that use certain sorts of pesticides, that abide by labour standards overseas and in Australia. There are all sorts of things that could be picked up in this, and I think the not only for local councils but federal and state government. So I was originally hoping for a report by December, but I can understand that would be probably unrealistic for staff timeline, so I can accept a February timeline. Hopefully it doesn't go through Parliament before then. There's a possibility it could be rushed through Parliament. And I know that Council, not so long ago, the previous Mayor Hopper sent a letter on behalf of Council protesting about this agreement. But anyway, I think we need as full a report as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, just quickly, I'd like to support the motion that Councillor Bolton put forward, and also just to sort of state that, this is a significant decision that's made at the federal level and could have a potential great impact on the local government sector. So I think it's in our best interest as a looking at risk mitigation for what kind of impact this will have on local council actions. And I think, the more understanding we have about this particular partnership agreement, the better stead we are as councillors in making future decisions. So, and also possibly advocacy towards
Thanks.
So thank Councillor Bolton for bringing this.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Is there any further debate on this item? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Next item, Councillor Bolton.
The Council writes to Heritage Victoria urging it to take action to stop any further demolition of the Panopticon and to advocate for the protection of the Panopticon in order to determine how best to preserve the unique history. Secondly, receives a report at the February Council meeting on the extent of destruction of heritage that has already occurred in the Pentridge Prison Complex and proposing steps to preserve the social history of Pentridge Prison, including its Indigenous history. And thirdly, that Council consider peace shrine to local residents who are prisoners of conscience in Pentridge, including John Curtin, Adele Pankhurst and others.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos, you wish to second that? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I would like to speak to it. I previously, earlier this year, also brought a resolution to Council around this issue of the destruction of Pentridge history. We preserve Port Arthur, but we don't preserve any of the history of Pentridge Prison. The demolition is occurring rapidly, and I fear that a lot of really quite critical history has already been wiped out. The developers have painted over in bright, happy colours some of the historical graffiti, etc. I know there's a mural by a famous Aboriginal artist towards the rear of the prison. I don't know if that's still there or not. There are many Indigenous prisoners. There were anti-conscription protesters, including the former Prime Minister John Curtin, famous suffragette Adela Pankhurst, and also I think her name was Julia Bella Guerin, who is the principal of the Brunswick Secondary School, the predecessor of Brunswick Secondary College at the time, for their anti-war, anti-conscription activity. Artist Noel Coonahan, after which the Coonahan Gallery is named, was jailed there for exercising free speech when governments were denying the right to free speech. So there's a lot of heritage that is, and people were imprisoned there for crimes that are no longer crimes in terms of homosexuality. So there's a lot of heritage there that does need to be preserved. I think it's very short-sighted that the state government has allowed so much to be destroyed without any kind of attempt to deal with the heritage in any kind of sensitive way. But I'd certainly like to commend this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos, would you like to speak?
Yeah, it is one of the most significant sites for not just Moreland but all of Melbourne. So Pentridge really hasn't had its fair share of protection, unfortunately. It's seen as a site which could be used for high density housing, and for years and years it's just been developed with the historical core left untouched, unfortunately, to a large degree. And now it's time for the developers to start developing that. And I am concerned, as I know Councillor Bolton is and many other councillors are, about the level of heritage which is being preserved and the amount of stories, I guess, and interpretive history which is not being incorporated into the site. Now, I'm not going to pronounce this correct, the Pentacon or Panopticon, which of course is those marvellous, two of them in Pentridge, and they're very rare. They've only been found, I think, in one or two other 1850s prisons, and I think none of them are outside of Pentridge in Australia. I think those two others are in the UK. And it tells a history about how prisoners were treated, particularly in the 1850s and 1860s, and how that prison system developed over time. And some of the best preserved ones are right here on our doorstep, discovered by archaeologists early last year. So we need to make sure that we are advocating really strongly to preserve those and to preserve as much of the site as possible. It's not going to be a nice place with 18-storey towers if the history of the site is not preserved. So I commend Councillor Bolton on bringing this forward, and I really hope that the Minister and all those involved, including the developers of the site and the new owner of one of the sites, will really do their best to make sure that these views are heard and taken into consideration in the development of Pentridge Prison.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Is there any further debate on this item? Okay, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I'd like to move to the next item.
Okay, that Council write to Transport Minister Jacinta Allen to request that the number 526 bus between Coburg and West Preston have its hours of operation extended into the evening and for a Sunday service to be introduced. Copies of this letter to be sent to local state member Lizzie Blanthorne and local federal member Kelvin Thompson.
Is there a seconder to this motion? Councillor Thompson. And I know that we do have some background in the text that you provided, which is really useful. Councillor Bolton, do you want to speak to it briefly? We do have the some of the background.
I would like to speak to it. This was raised by several residents at my last ward meeting that I held at Newlands. I mean, basically, this is a little corner of Moreland where there is really shocking public transport. Some of the people who attended my meeting are churchgoers, and they've got no means of getting to church on a Sunday, but that's not the only activity. They just feel extremely restricted and socially isolated. Some of the elderly people who are very dependent on public transport. So, you know, I mean, a letter's the least that council could do. Certainly, I think we need to do stronger advocacy for this pocket of Moreland that's lacking in public transport.
Councillor Thompson, you don't want to speak? Councillor Kavanagh.
Just a small suggestion. because it goes to West Preston, I know exactly where that goes to. I'm sure that Robin Scott is the member for West Preston, so we'll probably write to him as well.
So we're adding
If we can-
Robin Scott. You're happy?
Yeah.
Mover is happy
Yeah.
with that amendment.
Yeah.
Is there any debate on this item? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. And your final item, Councillor Bolton?
My final item is that Council write to State Housing Minister Martin Foley and Premier Daniel Andrews expressing Moreland Council's opposition to any further transfer of public housing and opposition to any further sell-offs of public housing, and including a copy of the motion passed by Moreland Council in 2013 which reflected this position. At this time of acute housing shortage, the state government should be investing in new public housing. Copies of this letter to be sent to local state members Lizzie Blanthorne and Jane Garrett, local federal member Kelvin Thompson, and Greens leader Greg Barber.
Do you have a seconder to this motion?
No, but can I just point out,
Hold on. I just want to ask for a seconder to this motion. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Bolton, do you want to speak to it? I'll enter debate and ask questions following it.
This is a motion in response to an announcement by the state government in mid-October that there was going to be large-scale transfer of public housing to community housing providers, and also selling off of out-of-date public housing. My reason for putting this forward, and this is consistent with a motion which was passed, I think Councillor Thompson moved it in 2013, is that community housing isn't as good at helping very vulnerable people on very low incomes as public housing. For example, Hope Street Family and Youth Services is not able to get its youth housed in the community housing sector because they won't accept people on a youth allowance. Actually, do we have quorum?
Yeah, I was just
Sorry,
do we have quorum?
Yes, we have quorum.
Just,
yes.
okay. So, you know, I mean, that's why it's really critical to preserve public housing if some of the most vulnerable of people, such as young people on the youth allowance, are not housed by these community housing providers. And while I wholeheartedly supported the motion earlier about affordable housing and setting up the land trust, that's something where the council will be partnering with registered housing providers. We still need to preserve our public housing and actually expand it if we're going to deal seriously with the lack of affordable housing in this state.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Thompson, would you like to add anything
Nothing
further?
further.
Is there any debate on this item? Councillor Tapanos, you had a
no, I
question?
was just going to, perhaps, I was just going to mention
You
that.
just stand.
It is.
Councillor Tapanos, you just be on your feet.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention, when we are writing letters to members of parliament, it is probably appropriate perhaps to say that we would write them to all of our local members, including the upper house members, of which there are 5, as opposed to just picking at random. I think that is more appropriate because the 5 members represent the 2 major and 1 minor political parties. Well, actually, the 5 members represent a whole range of political parties in the north, and they're all local members. So,
Councillor Tapanos, are you proposing an amendment that
perhaps a suggestion that all these letters be sent to the local members. It's obvious who they are, and the upper house members as well, who are in effect local members.
include upper and lower house reps for Moreland? Happy, the mover and seconder are happy with that amendment. No further debate on that item, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We have one more general business item. One more general business item which I would like to move. Yes. Well, we'll have to ask for another extension of time as well. So before moving to the last item, we're moving an extension of half an hour with a 3-minute adjournment once we finish the general business items before we start confidential. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Lenka Thompson. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. So I've got one general business item that the Mayor write a letter of condolence to the Sullivan family. Do I have a seconder to that item? Then I will speak to it. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Background is Pardon? Yeah, told myself to write a letter. That's right. I will write a letter of condolence to the family. Jeff Sullivan was a former councillor of the City of Brunswick, and he passed away on the 7th of November 2015. He was a proud councillor and community member who made a significant contribution to the business community as a business owner, Rotarian and football club president, and we've had some contact with the family and learnt of his passing, and we'd like to acknowledge it and get in contact with the family. Is there any comment on this item? So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. We'll now move into confidential business items. So could I please have a motion to close the council meeting to the public in accordance with section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989? Is there a mover? Oh, lots of movers for that one. I saw Councillor Thompson first. I'll go with that. Councillor Kavanagh seconded it. Sorry, Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.